Welcome to this week's episode of Sussex Sport Weekly podcast. I'm Matt Poll, and this week I'm joined by Brighton and Hove Albion writers Derren Howard and Frankie Elliot, and Crawley Town expert Mark Dunford. What a week it's been for Sussex two professional teams. Cut that bit. Brighton and Hove Albion put their FA Cup semi-final heartbreak and disappointing defeat at Nottingham Forest behind them with a record-breaking win over Wolves and the most dramatic of victories against Wembley foes Manchester United. Meanwhile, Crawley Town confirmed their League Two status for next season with a goalless draw against Walsall in front of a raucous Broadfield Stadium crowd. We'll pick over the bones of the Seagulls and the Red performance and look ahead to their games against Everton and Swindon Town, respectively, on Bank Holiday Monday. But starting with Brighton, they reignited their push for a place in Europe next season by recording their biggest ever top-flight victory at the expense of Wolves on Saturday. Dennis Undav, Pascal Gross and Danny Welbeck both helped themselves to doubles as the Seagulls ran out 6-0 winners. Where does that display rank amongst Albion's greatest performances, Derren? I think to say the Seagulls were ruthless would be a bit of an understatement.
Yeah, they had the finishing touch, that was for sure, against Wolves. Wolves were terrible, but Brighton played. They absolutely played them off the park. It was quite the contrast compared to their game against Nottingham Forest, where they looked jaded, they looked a little bit leggy after, which was to be expected after the FA Cup semi-final. And it was interesting hearing Steve Cooper talk after the Nottingham Forest match when he spoke about how he set his players up to deal with Brighton's style of play. And that's the blueprint of how to play Brighton. Brighton were a little bit off the pace, but he said in order to play against Brighton, you really have to be on it. The defenders have to work. Everybody has to really be on it. And Wolves were way off it. It was an absolute shambles from them, really, and a masterclass on how not to sort of play against Brighton, really. But Brighton did what they had to do, and it was great to see Dennis Undav in particular. I thought he played from the start. And he looked really dangerous in the box as well. And he showed some really good striking instincts that you kind of think, well, there is a Premier League striker in there. Whereas, he took quite a bit of stick after the FA Cup semi-final. He had one chance when he came on the bench in quite an intense game, and his touch wasn't quite as good as it should have been. And he, quite a few supporters piled onto him after that. And against Wolves, he was sharp, really, really good. And that was the most pleasing aspect for me. That his first goal was a typical striker's finish. But his second goal, which sealed the victory, they were 6-0 up, 5-0 up and cruising. And, it was really the cherry on the cake, but a great piece of skill to dink it over the goalkeeper as he did. So I think he will take a lot from that as well. De Zerbi spoke afterwards about Undav. As well, saying that he's actually been his biggest problem this season, because he knows there's a quality player in there, but getting him out on the pitch and getting Undav to believe that he is a Premier League player is his biggest challenge at the moment. But yeah, that was a great performance and great for Dennis Undav in particular.
Well, De Zerbi made 5 changes from last week's 3-1 defeat at Forest, dropping the likes of Caro Batoma, Alexis McAllister and Moses Caicedo to the bench. And he handed rare starts to Undav and Billy Gilmore. Undav, as Derren mentioned, got himself on the score sheet while Gilmore shone in midfield. Frankie, does the Wolves result showcase the sheer strength and depth Albion currently have at their disposal?
Well, the most important person it showcases it to is De Zerbi. I think I remember that after the Everton game back in January, they beat Everton 4-1 away from home. And De Zerbi, we were still getting to know De Zerbi as a manager, especially a manager in England. And he used Evan Ferguson. I think that was his first Premier League start. Sarmiento started the game as well. And he brought off the bench in Ciso and the youngster who I don't think has featured since Andrew Moran. And I think there was a slight feeling that De Zerbi might be a manager that is focused on youth. His philosophy might be to bring through good young players at Brighton, but he was very quick after that game to point out that he wasn't gifting young players chances. It wasn't the fact that just because they were young doesn't mean they got into his team coming off the bench or starting games. And that has been the case ever since. He is a perfectionist and he is a winner. And to do that, he wants his best players playing every game. So with the likes of Billy Gilmore, I don't think he ever saw an opportunity to get in front of Alexis McAllister or Moise Caicedo. They've started 12 of the last 13 league games since that Everton game. Obviously, McAllister just coming back from the World Cup after that Everton game, and then 14 of the last 17 in all competitions. And those games that they haven't started together, Pascal Gross has played instead. It's the same for Dennis Undav, Danny Welbeck and Evan Ferguson. He saw them as more reliable. He trusted them in the Premier League environment because he also said, let's not forget, back in February time when they drew to Leeds, he apologised for bringing on those young players, those secondary players, the Encisos and Sarmiento. He said he finds it difficult to get them on the pitch because he's looking to win games. These are tight games of footballs, and these young players, he didn't trust them, especially away from home, with the physicality and the brutalness of the Premier League. I think we saw that against Manchester United, as Derren alluded to. When Undav came off the bench at Wembley, he looked a bit off the pace. And wasn't up to the physical requirements that the game needed. So I think De Zerbi feared using them a little bit. I think he trusted his first 11 and 12, maybe 13 players, but the rest of the squad, I don't think he really relied on to get victories. I think his hand was forced after the Nottingham Forest game because his players were so tired, especially Caicedo and McAllister. They played 120 minutes on Sunday and then a full 90 away from home in Nottingham 3 days later. So he said in the press conference before the Wolves game that he made a mistake. He'd run them basically into the ground and he was looking to rerun his midfield. And I think, to be fair to Billy Gilmour, we knew there was a quality player in there. He's never not proven himself to be of a Premier League level when even when he burst onto the scene. So it's great for him. It's great for him that he's not got frustrated. I'm sure he's been disappointed not to have played more this season. I think he would like to have played more, but his opportunity arose on that Saturday. De Zerbi trusted him, but albeit with his hand probably tied a bit more than he wanted to, but he stepped up. And I think what we loved to see was that De Zerbi rewarded him for that, and he played him against Manchester United as well, which is a really big sign that he says, look, I've given you this responsibility and you've taken it. So, and this is me repaying the faith. So that's great to see, and is a great benchmark for the rest of the players in that squad. And I think for Undav, I think he's found a better position as well. I think Dennis Undav as a striker, as a number 9 in the line, I don't think that's his best position. I don't think he is of the Premier League level of someone like Ferguson or Welbeck who can play that role. Playing as a number 10, as he did against Wolves, suits him much better. He's a very much more technical player, and as you can see from the goals he scored. Same for Enciso as well. I think him playing out wide in the last 2 games is a much better position for him. I think, again, he played in the number 9 role against United and was bullied. To be honest, he was bullied, but he is quick. He is dangerous with the ball at his feet. And I think, again, against United at home in the Premier League last night and against Wolves, we've seen that. So De Zerbi's still learning a lot about these players as they learn about themselves. They're very young players, but I do genuinely believe that one of the most exciting things about Brighton is not only the fact they've got one of the best first 11s in the Premier League right now, is that they've got a crop of about 4 or 5 players under the age of 21 that really could be something special. And it won't come straight away. They're not going to be the best Premier League players next season. But with the likes of McAllister and Caicedo looking like they will leave, they've got some players there that can really step up in the next 2-3 years of that McAllister model that took 2-3 years to get to where he was. They've got players like that, and they showcased glimpses of that already as we saw in the Wolves win. So it's very exciting, and I think De Zerbi is relieved to know that he can trust on these players.
Well, as Frankie mentioned there, Gilmour started against United, and that game we're going to discuss in a little bit, but it meant the Scotland international made consecutive appearances in the first 11 for the first time in his Albion career. He was brilliant against Wolves, and likewise he was outstanding against United. Derren, how pleased are you to see Gilmour get an extended run in the team, and do Brighton have a ready-made replacement for a Caicedo or a McAllister should they depart in the summer?
It's never going to be easy for a player to step up and say, right, you are a like for like McAllister, you are Caicedo. He's got to be his own player, and he's a very very good player as he's proven. What I found interesting, I quite liked when I heard his interview when he spoke after the Wolves game, that he's actually he wasn't sitting on the touchline sulking. He was very very disappointed that he wasn't playing as much as he wanted to. But he said he was studying how Caicedo was playing and looking at his role in the team, looking at McAllister's role in the team as well, and saying, oh, what do I need to do to get up to that level? What do I need to do to get into the team? Rather than, as some players may have done, just maybe sort of try to look for a way out or force a loan move or say that, this is not going my way. He actually looked how he can do better. And, by looking at Caicedo and McAllister, he really knows his role and what's expected of him now as well. So he has got the talent. I was watching him against Man United as well. He seems to have got that extra physicality as well. He looks as though he's been pushing the weights in the gym, and he's got that real sort of strength about him now to be a Premier League midfielder consistently, not just to come in and play well for a few games here and then fade out of games. He really looks as though he's now got the fitness to go with the obvious technical ability that he has, because not only do you need that, but to be in that intense environment in a Premier League midfield, week in, week out, you need, it's full on. You have to be full throttle. You're in up against some of the best, players in the world. And you kind of think that now, Billy Gilmour, he believes he can mix it with those players now as well. And I think against Manchester United, he wasn't quite as dominant as he was against Wolves, but the Man United midfield is far better. But he more than held his own, and he showed some really nice touches in that match as well. And yeah, I think he can. These last two games has really changed, I think, everybody's outlook. You thought maybe he might look, is he going to be there next season? Would he look for a loan move? And I think him and Dennis Undav are now, you're sort of thinking, they are part of the future of Brighton, rather than just destined just to be on the fringes. So yeah, really pleased for him. Really pleased.
Well, last night, a 99th minute Alexis McAllister penalty helped Brighton secure a dramatic 1-0 win over United at a euphoric Amex. Not only did the result banish their Wembley heartbreak, but it further enhanced Albion's European ambitions. How good was that performance, Frankie? The Seagulls quite simply refused to be denied as they went in search of that winner, didn't they?
Yeah, they really did. I mean, it was so impressive. It really was. It was so impressive to be the clear team that was trying to win the game in the last 15, 20 minutes, especially, and the second half in general, really, was just a testament to how far Brighton have come. I think one of the most impressive things that I've seen under De Zerbi so far is not only the fact that he's got to play some great football, and he's actually managed to get them to play some football and get results very quickly in the grand scheme of things, is the fact that they are playing this brand of football against the best teams of the world. They don't change up their style. You normally associate teams that are knocking on the door of the top six for European places. They have got there from being a good side, but when they come up against the top six in games, they revert back to being the smaller team, sitting back, waiting to counter, trying to catch them on the break. Brighton don't do that at all. We've seen that at Wembley a couple of weeks ago, and we also saw that last night, and also against Tottenham and Chelsea away from home. It doesn't matter where they are playing, they're happy to continue and confident to continue playing their style of football, which is the centre-backs keeping the ball, inviting the press on. How many times have we seen Duncan, Webster stand with the ball at their feet, in goading top strikers, Marcus Rashford, Martial, to come and press them on the ball and play, and to happily play it around, to play the quick passes, 1-2 touch passes in their own box with their centre mids and get them out of trouble. And because they are confident and good enough to continue playing that brand of football, they create chances and dominate games. And I don't think there's been a single game under De Zerbi yet. And they've played some of the best teams in the country where you'd say, yeah, they were completely outplayed there. Yeah, like Brighton, they didn't turn up. They couldn't keep hold of the ball. They were very much second best. Every game they've played, you have to say, yeah, they created chances. They were on the ball the whole time. They didn't look like they were overwhelmed. And that's been not really fallen in their favour up until now. Obviously, we've had the decisions go against them at Tottenham, and obviously the penalty shootout defeat. But they've acted like a big team, and that's been the big thing, is that De Zerbi has come in and said to them, we are competing for the European place. If we want to compete for the European places, we need to act like a team that is playing in Europe. We need to act like a Liverpool. We need to act like a Tottenham. And they've taken that message on board, and they've been delivering it. So it's a really impressive thing to see that they can bounce back as well from what was a disappointing, what could have been their season-ending moment when they got knocked out of the FA Cup, and then going on and losing at Nottingham Forest. You sort of sit there and go, "Oh, is this where it all derails now? Is this where it falls apart?" Because as we said after that podcast, they played Wolves, who were in good form, and United, who they just lost to at Wembley and were trying to get Champions League qualification. So it felt like that was a key moment, and they delivered 2 victories without conceding a goal and scored 7. So the mentality seems to be coming, that elite mentality that De Zerbi talks about. It seems to be there, and he seems to be getting his message across that we fear no one, and that is what is going to take him a long way under him, I think.
As Frankie mentioned there, speaking of decisions, post-match, De Zerbi said there was a god of football after Brighton were awarded a late spot kick by VAR for a Luke Shaw handball. Again, as Frankie said, Albion have had a number of key decisions go against them, most notably in their draw at Crystal Palace and their contentious loss, shall we say, at Tottenham. And they've already had 3 apologies from refereeing body PGMOL this season. Derren, just how pleased will De Zerbi and Albion supporters be that luck was finally on their side against United at the Amex last night?
Yeah, you could tell by the sense of relief amongst the crowd when that decision was given. It was deep in injury time, and Luke Shaw said he got a nudge in the back afterwards, which is why he handballed it. But it was one of those decisions where some of them just really haven't gone Brighton's way this season. And there was an incident just before where Karim Matoma was bursting into the penalty box, and he was sandwiched between Wan-Bissaka and another defender, and you'd have thought that may have been checked. That could have gone their way as well. And Brighton fans were getting quite edgy at that point. It was, songs of the Premier League's corrupt, going around the stadium, and it was so when that one was actually given in injury time, it was a huge relief. So yeah, it was great, and I'm sure De Zerbi was pleased. And as you rightly say, he was talking about gods of football and finally being on their side. And they have been on the receiving end of so many harsh decisions on VAR. They've received the least sort of decisions that have gone their way this season. So to finally have one go their way, it was great. And McAllister was just absolutely nerveless on the penalty. I was speaking to Jacob, a reporter who was at the match afterwards, and it's when these penalties are given now, it's a whole sort of drama in itself. From when the incident happened, it took about 5 minutes between the incident occurring and when McAllister's going to take his penalty. And so all the United players are, surrounding, trying to get at the penalty taker. They know he's a penalty taker. Then you've got a load of Brighton players guarding the penalty spot now because Man United players are trying to scuff up the penalty spot and take little digs at the spot. And it's a whole new thing in football, which you don't often see. You didn't really see in the past. McAllister just took himself away from it, stood to one side, had the ball on the edge of the penalty box, let it all go on, and took a few deep breaths and whacked it into the top corner. So it was a great end to what was a really good display. And at last, the decision went Brighton's way.
Well, the win over United saw Brighton and De Zerbi break a number of records. The Seagulls completed a league double over the Red Devils for the first time in the club's history. And this was also Roberto De Zerbi's 12th Premier League win as Albion boss in his 26th game in charge, which was as many matches as the Seagulls were in the whole of last season under Graham Potter. The 55 Premier League points they've accrued so far is their most ever in the top flight and the 7th highest points tally in the club's history. But putting all that aside, Frankie, just how good are Brighton's class of 2022-23? And looking into your crystal ball, and I know there's probably going to be a lot of mitigating factors in terms of managers and players, but just how far can the club progress in, say, the next 5 years?
Well, I think it's fair to say it's the best Brighton side of all time. I don't think there's any doubt in that. Obviously, statistically speaking, it is. But in regards to the brand of football that they're playing, as we've alluded to, and the fact that they are competing with the very best, not only in England, but in Europe, showcases to me that this is definitely the best Brighton side. I mean, I feel it would have been a really nice, memorable moment if they'd made it an FA Cup final side, but a side that makes European football will have to do, I guess. But I by far and away Brighton's best team. But in regards to the future, I think this is where people need to be careful and enjoy the moment, because football moves incredibly quickly. If you look at the teams that have done Brighton in the last couple of years, Leicester obviously winning the league, finishing 5th in 2020, 5th in 2021. They're in danger of being relegated this season. Less than 10 years after they won the league. Burnley finished 7th, I believe, 4-5 seasons ago. Now they've been promoted but got relegated. Southampton 6th in 2016, 7th in 2015, 8th in 2014. Those great sides that Ronald Koeman and Pochettino built they're going down this season, I would imagine. I think, have been circling the drain for a while. West Ham, 7th and 6th 2 seasons ago, in trouble again. So I think it's important to remember that for a club like Brighton, who are trying to knock on the door, there's always the problem that the big bad wolf, the big six, can just cherry pick your best players and managers, and also people that are in the boardroom. The scouts that have been so highly regarded in Brighton's structure. I'm sure a lot of big clubs are looking at them as well, and obviously Chelsea pinched a few at the start of this season to begin with. But the two, so we don't know what's coming around the corner. There's a big summer ahead. In regards to, obviously, we're hearing McAllister looks set to leave. We're unsure about Caicedo as well. The tempts of a big club. I know there's a lot of talk about, well, if they get European football, they may be tempted to stay. I don't think that's going to be enough. I have to say, I don't. If someone like Liverpool or Manchester United come to sign you, you're going to want to leave, because you've got more opportunities of winning trophies, and that's the bottom line. That's something Brighton just can't offer. But the two key things that could keep them being realistic, Brighton will want to. They'll say that a good 5 years will be being in the top 10 for most of those 5 years, and potentially qualifying for Europa League or Conference League 1 or 2 of those years as well. That would be brilliant. That would be an exceptional for the next 5 years. The way they do that is, obviously, they've got the structure in place. They've probably got the best run football club in England right now. You can't argue with how they've got this far from where they were 10 years ago in League One. That's all been down to how they've been set up, and I don't think they're going to change it anytime soon. That will take them a long, long way in maintaining being the level they are now, and possibly even improving. And the main thing, the key thing that has kept them being the club they are, is De Zerbi. They've got one of the best managers in Europe, I believe, and he is obviously well sought after. But in an ideal world, because he will move on again, I think he'll be moving on to a big club at some point in the future. If they say get two years out of him, 2 seasons, that would almost certainly make sure that they maintain being a top level club, because he is that good a manager as he is. I don't think Brighton will be having the season they did. I know they started well under Graham Potter, and I know he's built this team, so to speak, in the last 3 or 4 years. I don't think they would have been as strong this season if Potter had stayed. I think De Zerbi has taken them to a new level. So I think the board need to back him. I think they need to bring in the players that he requires. They need to bring in players that are of first team level ready. I think they don't need to bring not sort of young player model. I think they need to be first team ready, but they need to fit the system. Not too many big egos. Not just going to try and build and equip a gun-ho team for Europe and for the Premier League. So if they can equip him and keep De Zerbi there for as long as possible, they've got every chance of continuing the success. But like I say, it's a very, very difficult job to manage, because it's a very slippery slope, as we've seen with a number of big clubs this season.
We talk about squad building there, Frankie. They've been heavily linked with Liverpool's James Milner and João Pedro at Watford. Are they good additions in your mind for next season?
I think the James Milner signing is actually a really good one. I think it's a really, really good one. I think that's a real clear indication of what I think this squad needs, which is the experience. I think De Zerbi has spoken a lot about the experienced players being so important to this squad, and I think James Milner would probably not be a player that's going to be playing an awful lot. He is 38, I believe, next year, so I can't imagine. But in regards to having that nearly 20 years experience in Premier League football, will go an awful long way for people like Enciso, Sarmiento, even Billy Gilmore, people like that. And will work well with people that he already knows. Adam Lallana, obviously played with at Liverpool, and Danny Welbeck, he's played with at England. So that creates a good ethos of leadership players, I think. The João Pedro thing is interesting. I think they do need some backup in the attacking areas, and he is that. He's never really proven himself at Premier League level. Is the one question mark, but he's playing in a better side than the Watford team he was originally playing in. So they're interesting moves. I think the fact they're making moves so early is also an interesting statement, because I think they are trying to show De Zerbi that we mean business, and we're not going to be playing around. We understand what you need and what you require, and we want to keep you here for as long as possible. And I think these are the additions being made early on to show him that.
Well, Monday evening sees Brighton entertain second from bottom Everton at the Amex. The Toffees will be without skipper Seamus Coleman, who looks set to be ruled out for the rest season, and defender Ben Godfrey is also out with an injury. Albion have proved that they can be a handful for any team, Derren, so I'm sure Everton will not be relishing their trip to Sussex at all.
No, I think they would have looked at the Wolves game and the Manchester United game, and seen that Brighton are back on track, that they've got their A game back, and it's going to be a tough game for them. And when Brighton played them at Goodison Park, Everton were really going through a bad patch. I think Frank Lampard was still in charge then, and it was as routine as a 4-1 victory can get. Brighton were very good that day, and they put Everton to bed quite comfortably, really. I think Sean Dyche will have them, really pumped up for this one. They need the points. They've got this stadium that they're building, and it would be a disaster for the club if they go down. And the players have that responsibility on their shoulders for these final few games. And I'm sure Dyche will be drumming that into them, the importance of this game and how difficult the Brighton game is going to be. I think clubs now, they come to Brighton and approach it as though they're facing one of the best sides in the league now. They're facing almost like a top 6 team when they play Brighton. So I expect Brighton to have plenty of the ball, and it's just a case of whether Everton are going to be, whether they're going to work hard enough, whether they're really going to put the work in to stop Brighton from creating the chances. And then if they've got Dominic Calvert-Lewin fit as well, he's obviously a danger. So Everton will be a threat. They will be dangerous opponents. But based on the last 2 performances, I expect Brighton to get the job done. Hopefully, Evan Ferguson may be fit to come back in. That would be a huge boost. Danny Welbeck, he was good, very good against Wolves, and against Manchester United, he tired in the second half. So if Evan Ferguson can come back into the team, that will be a boost. The only problem again is that right back area. Moises Caicedo played there against Manchester United and did extremely well. I gave him man of the match for that one. So if he's back at right back, you could see Billy Gilmore again having his 3rd appearance on the trot. So yeah, interesting. It'd be a good tussle again, a really good tussle.
Well, meanwhile, after what seemed like a season of perpetual crisis, Crawley Town secured their place in League 2 for next season with a goalless home draw against Walsall. Relegation rivals Hartlepool beat 9-man Barrow 3-1, but the Reds claimed the point they needed to confirm survival. It wasn't a vintage performance, Mark, but I'm sure Crawley supporters won't mind at all. What was the overriding feeling at the Broadfield Stadium post-match?
Yeah, I think the game was actually, and the performance was secondary. As long as they got that point they needed, that was enough. And afterwards, it was relief sort of instantly, and then it was celebration. All the players, because it was the last home game of the season as well, all the players came out, met the fans, had their photos taken, signed shirts and programs, etc. And it was a real sort of celebration of, we got through this season. It's been, like you said, a perpetual crisis. It's just seemed in January, it seemed doom and gloom. Everybody was resigned to relegation and that, but they got through it. And it was, it was a really nice atmosphere. And the fans, I mean, in the past, I think I've been quite critical of Crawley fans at times for not focusing on the right thing during a game and that. But on Saturday, they were magnificent. They just, all the way through. I think the first time they stopped singing was at about something like 27th minute. They were singing, even though it was a dreadful game of football, to one side that just didn't want to lose and the other side that just weren't very good in Walsall. So, and it was, the atmosphere was amazing. I think there was 4,100 and something there. And and it was amazing. And but it was interesting listening to Scott Lindsey. He was praising the fans as well after the game, but he said that apart from being safe for next year and securing league football, they haven't actually achieved anything this year. And it's great to celebrate this moment, but next year he wants to be celebrating for winning something. So it was good to see him have that focus straight afterwards, and he wasn't going over the top thinking this was the greatest thing ever, that they've literally just survived relegation with a 0-0 draw against Walsall kind of thing. So no, it was a great occasion, and I was allowed pitch side to do some video and that of all the fans, etc. And it was great to be there. But when I was stood waiting for players and Scott Lindsey to come out to do his post-match, I was stood with some of the staff, and you could see on their faces it was huge relief. And it was just like, and it was quite emotional at times seeing some of them as they hugged each other and that, because I mean, you get relegated to the National League, there's jobs on the line and the thing like that. So you could sense the relief, not just with the players, not with the fans, but the staff as well. So
you mentioned it was an emotional occasion at the end of the game, but Scott Lindsey in his post-match press conference spoke about his mum. Can you explain a little bit about that situation there?
Yeah, he said in his post-match that he knew it was going to be a good day for Crawley Town, because as he was driving in, it was a year to the day that his mum died, his mum Jean, and yeah, he got quite emotional talking about it. And he said she helped them win today. She knew he knew that she was looking down on them, kind of thing. And yeah, she played a big part for the sort of preparation of the day for Scott Lindsey and that. So that was really nice to see, because we know with football managers, a lot of them media trained, a lot of them, you don't get that human side a lot of the time. But that was really, it was just not nice to see, obviously, because it's a sad thing for Scott. But it was it was a really nice moment after the game. And because Scott was actually born in Walsall as well, grew up there a little bit when he was younger. So he said there was a lot of things that was just, everything seemed to be pointing towards it was going to be a good day for Crawley Town. So that was, really good to see.
Well, since March the 11th, the Reds have taken 17 points from a possible 36, but prior to that, Crawley had taken just 4 from a possible 27, following Scott Lindsey's appointment on the 11th of January. In your opinion, Mark, what has changed for the Reds since the March 11th? Is it something that Lindsey has done in terms of tactics, or is there more to it than that?
Tactics are a big part of it, but I think there is a lot more to it. I think it's after Matthew Everington left and that, when Chris Galley was still in post as director of football, a lot of people were talking about the changing the culture of the club. Now, some of that goes back to John Yems. But they were just talking about the culture. And Scott Lindsey, I remember in his very first interview with us, he talked about what did he say? I think it was something like it's quite loose at Crawley Town. It needed more discipline, and there needed to be sort of a better work ethic and that. And I think all that sort of background work in changing that culture around the club and how the team trains and that, I think that's helps. But he's also instilled big belief in the players. Dom Talford mentioned a couple of weeks ago, at the Hartlepool game, before the game, Scott Lindsey said to him, "You're going to score 2 goals today and you're going to be the hero." And I don't think Dom Talford's had that all season. He hasn't had anyone telling him, "Right, you're going to be the hero today," and that. So he, and what did Dom Talford do? Scored goal of the season, exactly. Scored 2 goals, and at that point, pretty much assured that they would be in League 2 next year. So I think there's that sort of man management side of things with Scott, but the tactics as well. There's more of an identity. We had Kevin Betsy, like we said, Lewis Young, Matthew Everington, one game of Darren Byfield. The players had the first half of the season, 3 or 4 different ways of playing, and none of it was working. So, but he's come in, every player seemed to know their role. I mean, I remember in that first game when they beat 3-2, beat Salford City 3-2 under Scott Lindsey. You could see straight away every player knew what their role was and where they needed to be at what a certain point. And we hadn't seen that all season. So I think, the tactics play a big part, but I think there's a lot behind the scenes with the man management. It's reinstalling that belief and sort of sorting out discipline and the work ethic of the squad as well.
Well, thoughts will probably inevitably now turn to player recruitment in the summer. And in your opinion, Mark, where do you think the Reds need to strengthen? And are we going to see a massive turnover of players, or is Scott Lindsey going to stick with the core that kept him up?
Well, I think there is a core there. I don't know how much of them will still be there next year. I think one of the major issues he's got over the summer is that they currently, I think it's around 18 or 19 players who are in contract. Normally, you get to this point of the season, there's probably about 9 or 10 that are in contract, and you've got a squad of 25 you want to beat. So he could be looking on a normal year, be looking at, right, how do I want to build this squad? I've got these 10 players. He's got 18. Now he's got to decide what he does with that 18, because I'm sure he doesn't want all of those 18 players that are in contract. So that's the initial thing, negotiating, either cancelling those contracts, finding clubs to buy them, put them out there to buy. But if you look at it squad-wise, I mean, I think they definitely need a striker, a big striker, something Crawley haven't had for a long time. I'm sure we've mentioned it on the podcast before. I think the last time they had a big sort of archetypal big striker was Thomas Verheight under Harry Kill, the big Dutcher. and he didn't work out too well.
No,
But I know in the January transfer window, they were trying to buy Josh Amura from Hartlepool. And from what I was told, he wanted to come, but Hartlepool wouldn't let him go. And why would you? It would be, imagine selling one of your best strikers to your relegation rivals. Yeah. You never see that happen, do you? With hints of sarcasm. So maybe he is someone, now Hartlepool have got relegated, that is someone they will pursue their getting him in. But yeah, I think just like Dom Telford, if Dom Telford stays, he is capable of scoring a lot of goals, as we've seen in the previous year at Newport County. So if he's got that big person next to him, I think as a two up front, that would work really well. Remy Ote, he's been a revelation in the second half of the season under Scott Lindsey. So I think there's another striker and then you've got Ashley Naddison as well. So you've got, if you can bring one more in, you've got 4 there that you could pick from to play up top. In midfield, I think you've got Ben Gladwin is obviously going to stay. They've brought in Anthony Grant and Jordan Much, but I think they were quite short-term fixes just to add a bit of experience and steel to that midfield. So I don't think we will see them next year, but they will need to bring in someone else in midfield, along with Jack Powell. He was voted player of the season. I think he will still be there. A couple of players they had on loan, Tom Fellows and that, obviously unlikely to be returning. So maybe a couple more midfielders. And in defence, they've got a lot of good defence, but they've had a lot of injury problems with them this year. And it's all about the combinations in defence, because you've got Harry Ransom, Joel Lynch, Dion Conroy, Ludwig Franchiletti. You would play Ludwig with Dion or Joel Lynch. You would play Harry with Dion and Joel Lynch, but you wouldn't play Ludwig with Harry, kind of thing. So it's getting that combination right, and maybe a bit of cover because, Joel Lynch, he's had a lot of injuries this year. Dion Conroy's played the last 3 games with a tear in his Achilles, but he won't be playing against Swindon. So so there's a lot of recovery to get, but who knows if that's caused any damage going forward in that. So they will need to bring that coverage. So I think Scott's probably got an idea. Ellis Yandolo from Swindon, another former Swindon player, could be coming this way. They wanted to bring him in January, I believe, but it never quite worked out. So hopefully that's a defender to bring in. But yeah, maybe 4 or 5 really key first players that could be competing for first team places is what they'll be looking for, and then obviously fringe stuff depending who they get rid of, etc.
What of goalkeeper Corey Adai, Mark? He's been much improved towards the back end of the season, but as the Tranmere game showed, he is prone to quite high-profile errors, unfortunately. He
is, yeah. He's a shame, but in 3 clean sheets in the last 3 games, and he has been one of consistently the best players in those. Like he stood up where he needed to. Yes, he made that huge howler against Tranmere. I mean, he slipped up on the pitch and just let a Tranmere striker through. But later on in that game, he saved a penalty. So, can you criticise him that much? But earlier in the season, he was prone to a few more gaffes than that, and his positioning at free kicks and things like that seemed to be a bit suspect. But he has really improved. I think they probably, do need to bring in another keeper. Obviously, they had Ryan Schofield came in, but he was on loan, so he'll go back to Huddersfield. Another one. And then it'll be interesting who they bring in, whether it is they see Corey as now the first team keeper, or they bring someone in to push Corey, or come in and Corey then becomes the second. I don't know. But I think Corey deserves a chance for what he's achieved, and certainly in the last 3 games.
The Reds conclude their League 2 campaign at Scott Lindsey's former club Swindon on Monday. To add further intrigue to the tie, the Robins have sacked Lindsey's successor, former Chelsea midfielder Jody Morris, after the Robins fell out of play contention. You spoke to Lindsey ahead of the game at the county ground, Mark, and he admitted he never really achieved a connection with Swindon supporters in the same way that he has at the Broadfield Stadium. Can you explain why Lindsey didn't feel that connection at Swindon, and why your story that's stated as much has wound up so many Robins fans on Twitter?
Yeah, it's a funny one because I'd heard when Lindsey first came in, not from Lindsey himself, but that he never really got on with anyone at Swindon. And even though he had them in the playoffs for pretty much his whole tenure, because he was assistant manager the season before, and then when Ben Garner left to join Charlton, he became first team manager for the beginning of the 2022-23 season. So he came in, he got, I think in the first 15 games, he says that he had the best start a Swindon team has had in the last 16 seasons. People have questioned that comment now, but I haven't gone back and looked at 16 seasons worth of Swindon results because I'm just not that interested. Yeah, so
lazy journalism, that Mark.
It is extremely lazy journalism, and I accept that. I hold my hands up, and I'm sure they'll tell me that on Monday when I'm at Swindon. But yeah, so and he had a great start, and they were in the playoffs the whole time for the first half of the season, but he never ever got the praise from the Swindon fans he feels he deserved. I get the impression from Scott that he's not the kind of guy that's looking for plaudits everywhere and to be praised every week. But he said there was I think there was a run where they won 3 or 4 games on the trot. Then there was a 0-0 home draw, and he got booed at the end of it.
Really?
And that's what he said. Yeah, and it's just like, what is that about? So, and he said he thinks it's, and he told us yesterday, and you can see the video interview on sussexworld.co.uk, that I think he thought the Swindon fans, before he was appointed, they wanted an Alex Ferguson. They probably wanted Pep Guardiola, something like that. But all they got was Scott Lindsey, the assistant manager from the year before. He's not an exciting appointment, and he will admit that himself, that he's not a big name. He's not an exciting appointment, but he did the job, and he did the job that he was asked to do. But when I tweeted that story, and that I did get quite a bit of reaction from Swindon fans, and the main beef seemed to be, he promised fast attacking football, and we never got it. So like that, it's like, what would you rather? Fast attacking football, lose loads of games, pretty much what Crawley did at the beginning of the season. Would you rather have that, or would you rather have someone sort of doing a solid job, having you in the playoff? Yeah. So it might be.
Has anyone played fast attacking football in League Two though? Is that even a thing?
No, you're absolutely right. Even if they did have fast attacking football in League Two, I don't think it would work.
Well, Kevin Betsy tried. Lord
he tried it, and it never, never came off. Yeah, it was. But I think this is my own personal opinion. No one said this to me. I think there is Swindon Town. They were once in the Premier League, lest we forget, a few years ago now. And there might be just that big club mentality, thinking we are bigger. But you're in League Two. You're in League Two, and you're getting beaten by teams such as Crawley Town, etc. Crawley did beat them. It was one of Scott Lindsey's last games, I think, in charge of Swindon. They lost 2-0 at the Broadfield Stadium when Jack Powell scored his goal from like the halfway line or whatever it was. So but he did seem he didn't know what else he could have done at Swindon to get the fans on side, other than he just wasn't a big name, and I think that's why he didn't work there. So, but I think he sort of stirred it up a little bit with his comments yesterday, and I think it's going to be quite a hostile atmosphere for him on Saturday. And whether that's what he wants and that's what he thrives on, I don't know. But it's going to be an interesting one.
Well, quickly moving over to Steve Bone's score prediction corner. Brighton and Everton on Monday evening. Derren, how do you see that one going? Is it going to be nothing but a Brighton win?
Yeah, I think Brighton will get the 3 points again for that one and continue their push for Europe. So I'm going to go for a 2-0 win for Brighton there.
Frankie, how do you see that one going?
Yeah, I think Everton have entered the famous phase of the season where they've entered the fear-for stage. So you fear for Everton now, especially after the Newcastle game that was last week and not winning against Leicester either. They didn't play well at Goodison Park against Brighton, and I can't see them putting in a performance at the Amex this time around. So I think I'm going to go for a 3-0 Brighton win.
How do you see that one going, Mark? And could there be a claim to be made that Brighton could be a little bit complacent going into this one?
I don't think so, just because of everything that we've said beforehand about De Zerbi. He doesn't strike me as the kind of person that would ever let his side do that. And I don't like when they played Nottingham Forest and lost, it wasn't because they were complacent or anything like that. I think they were just knackered and they were just and they had a few injuries and that. So I don't think that will happen. And they won't reach Wolves' levels of score, but I think it will be 4 or 5-0. I really do. I can't see Everton have been so poor. I mean, you saw that new card. That Alexander Isak run was incredible to sell that goal. And I can't, and you can see Matoma doing that against the Everton defence. So, 4 or 5-0 I'm going for.
And Crawley Swindon, apart from quite a spicy atmosphere, how do you see that one going?
Well, I've already wound the Swindon fans up enough. I'm going to continue to do that. I'm going 3-1 Crawley. I think it's going to be a bit of a showpiece. All the players are going to be a bit relaxed. Dom Talford to get a couple, and a Jack Powell stunner, I reckon. Yeah.
Frankie, what about yourself?
It's funny listening to this because I grew up very, very close to Swindon, so I know a lot of Swindon fans. And Mark is absolutely right. Because they are probably one of the biggest teams in League Two. They've got one of the biggest stadiums. They used to be a Premier League club, and even when they were in sort of 2010s, they had managers like Gus Poyet, Dennis Wise, Paolo Di Canio. They've always been quite a glamorous club, employing quite headline named managers, and also they won League Two with Di Canio as well. So they've always been that alignment. So I think the Scott Lindsey appointment, knowing the Swindon fans that I do, I can see why they didn't get on with him, because he wasn't a headline grabbing name. So that is quite funny to hear. So I would really, really like them to win it. Is it at the county ground on Monday?
Indeed, yes.
I'd love nothing more than for Crawley. So I'm going to go for a 2-0 Crawley win.
Derren, are we going for a Crawley clean sweep?
Yeah, I'm going to. I'd love to see the Crawley players just say thanks to Scott Lindsey for keeping them up, and do it for him. He would love it to put one over them. The Swindon fans, I'm sure. So hopefully the Crawley players can do it for Scott Lindsey this week.
Can I just add quickly? Sorry, Matt. Just before, and also what Mark said about League Two relegation is actually a massive thing. Is like Premier League relegation and all the relegations we normally hear about. It's all about the millions and millions of pounds that clubs are losing out on, and it doesn't seem particularly real. But as Mark has alluded to, relegation from Championship down, it means jobs, it means livelihoods, it means careers, and that's why it's such a special moment when you stay up, and that's why it's such a brilliant thing for Crawley to have achieved, because it's a big thing for everyone involved in the club.
Well put. And very, 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 very finally, we want to extend our best of luck to Worthing Football Club in their National League South playoff semi-final against Oxford City on Sunday. 450 Reds fans are travelling north to Oxfordshire, hoping to see their club book a place in the final against either Dartford or St Albans City. So we wish the very best of luck to Adam Hinchwood and all his players. Thank you very much for that chat. That was brilliant. And you can catch up with all the latest sports news covering everything we have talked about today at sussexworld.co.uk/sport. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you all next week.
Thanks, guys.
Beautiful.